Welcome to this Tuesday reflection on the 13th of October. This month I'm looking at some of the social challenges that we face as a Western society. There were, of course, many social challenges endemic in our communities even before the pandemic took hold here. But the last 7 months or so have brought those challenges into sharp focus. Those who were poor and struggling at the beginning of this year have been hit the hardest, both by the virus, but also by the measures put in place to try and contain it. The prospects of that changing are bleak, unless there is serious intervention at local and national government level. But there are many more who are going to find themselves poor, as the measures being put in place are themselves threatening not only livelihoods, but people's physical and mental well-being. If we're going to ensure that we build the better and fairer world that many long for, then we need to acknowledge the biases at work in our society, many of them unconscious biases, that make it so difficult to ensure an equitable distribution of the wealth and resources available. Last week, I talked about the scourge of homelessness and how the way we think about people determines our attitudes and behaviours towards them. If we choose to believe, and it is a choice, that those on welfare benefits are scroungers, wanting to get as much out of the state as they can without bothering to work, then we, both individually and as a society, will treat them accordingly. If, however, we choose to believe that they deserve dignity and respect, along with the care and support needed for them to flourish as members of society, then what they will experience will be very different. What we believe about a person or a group of people, however that belief has been formed, will determine what we say about them and how we treat them. In his book entitled Injustice: Why Social Inequality Persists, Daniel Dorling identifies 5 interrelated aspects of our social infrastructure that keep poor people poor, and thereby rich or richer people richer. Fundamentally, he names elitism in education as the foundational principle which keeps people in their place. The kinds of schools, colleges and universities that parents can afford to send their children to is key to what future prospects those young people will have. Elitism through education then leads to exclusion and prejudice, the corollaries of which are greed and despair. It's long been recognised that education gives people a way out of poverty. It can lead to greater opportunity, better paid jobs, and more choice about where and how people live. Perhaps most importantly, it gives people self-confidence and self-respect, as well as hope, motivation, and aspiration. But education is important wherever we happen to be on the social spectrum and whatever age we are. It widens our horizons and gives us insights into cultures and worlds that are beyond our immediate experience. It broadens our understanding and, if we allow ourselves to hear the voices of those who are different to us, it can also challenge our assumptions and the things we so easily take for granted. This was brought home to me in a striking way during my sabbatical some years ago. I spent some time at the Queen's Foundation in Birmingham, where ordinands from the Anglican and Methodist churches train together. I was interested in speaking particularly with Professor John Hull about the ways in which his faith had been shaped through his experience of going blind in middle age, an experience brilliantly captured in his books. But Queen's also had a black theology department, now known as the Centre for Black Theology, and I was keen to talk with the staff and students about this area of theology that I knew very little about. Well, in my conversations with the staff and students of that department, I got more than I'd bargained for, as I was systematically challenged about the levels of racism in the Anglican Church, something that had not really occurred to me before then. I found myself feeling profoundly uncomfortable as I began to realise the extent to which the Church is racist in failing to welcome black people for who they are. Most of the black people I spoke to in that week had left the Anglican Church because there had been no attempt to make any space for them to share their history, culture and experience in the white congregations they'd tried to join. They were made to feel that they didn't fit. It made for painful listening. But it started a similar shift within me that had taken place when I'd first started my work as chaplain to the deaf community. I began to see things differently, to see them differently, and to recognise once again how easy it is to make assumptions about people and groups of people that we actually know nothing about. Daniel Dorling finishes his book Injustice with these words: "Everything it takes to defeat injustice lies in the mind. So what matters most is how we think." After over 300 pages of analysis, historical documentation and comment, this was his conclusion. Injustice continues to flourish because of the ways in which we choose to think about people. If each of us chose to think differently, to see people who are different to us as God sees them, then our behaviour would change, and, step by step, so would the world.